pragmatists, they always talk about pragmatism and we have to think about this and we have to think about that. But do you notice they never bring up any type of long-term analysis? And what I mean by this is, what would be the results of a Hillary Clinton presidency? Like, they make it seem as though, we're saved from Donald Trump. Okay, so Donald Trump is not in there. Hillary Clinton wins. What would be the result of a Hillary Clinton presidency? Some people say, well, okay, we'll get some seats on the court, on the Supreme Court. Okay, that's a fair argument to make. But what would those seats actually do to benefit any sort of agenda moving forward? At best, the appointees that Hillary Clinton would select would not move us forward. They would just keep us where we are. And to many Americans out there, where we are is on a downward trajectory. So holding the line in a downward trajectory doesn't really increase or improve the lives of thousands of people, possibly millions of people that are out there. That is not that's not actually doing anything for a lot of people. So now you have this representative of the left holding the line on a downward trajectory instead of improving the lives of people. So what will that probably do? I mean, it could likely, maybe we beat this Trump, but 4 years from now, we have another Trump. And, in the midterms, we get, 10 or 15, 20 or 30 more Trumps in the legislature. Like, nobody talks about this type of analysis. Like, we have to be honest. We already know that Hillary Clinton is a corporatist. She's a neoliberal. She's going to expand, military intervention. She's not really going to make much progress in terms of economically benefiting the people who are poor and suffering, the people who are least represented in our system today. Her goals are not to address those issues. And those people, that ground that she chose not to tread is just fertile ground. There's plenty of votes to be picked up there by the right. And they're gonna go in there and they're gonna get those votes. And so while we don't get them today, a couple of years from now, we're gonna get them anyway, because we're not addressing the underlying issue. The underlying issue is that people are suffering and they feel like their political process is doing nothing about it. And when you're at that place of despair, it's real easy for a strong man or anybody with a loudspeaker or anybody with a large propaganda engine to pump out any message that they put and call it good. It's easy for anybody back behind that kind of infrastructure to take advantage of the moment and swoop in and just rip to shreds any type of establishment candidate, especially ones that have been in there and are seen as the face of oppression for millions of people that are suffering. It'll be so easy for them to just come in and beat that. And the reason why I can say this is because look at the elections, just the election season right now. Hillary Clinton is in a near tie with Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton is in a near tie with Donald Trump. I want that to sink in for everybody that believes Hillary Clinton is this unbeatable candidate. She's in a near tie with Donald Trump. But if Hillary Clinton is not enough, that this is all forecasting, right? It's not set in stone. Let's look back at the Obama administration. Under the Obama administration, Democrats lost 800 elected offices across the country. And Obama's a lot more well-liked than Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is hated. There's a special brand or a special amount of hatred out there. It's just reserved just for her. Don't know why they have a particular interest in her or why they hate her so much. But under Barack Obama, he didn't have that much hatred. He has racism working against him, but he didn't have the same kind of hatred that Hillary Clinton has. Maybe it's a wash. Maybe the racism is stronger. Maybe not. I'm not sure. I can't measure it. But under his presidency, the hope and change, we lost 800 elected seats across the country. That is what happens when you turn to like a neoliberal approach to addressing the grievances that are growing out of control. That is what happens when you try to hold the line on a downward trajectory. That is a result of that. And anybody who believes this last election cycle or the 2010 election cycle wasn't a referendum on Democrats and how poorly they did in terms of advancing an agenda that would help the vulnerable people in this country is just selling you nonsense. Neoliberalism provides fertile soil for neo-fascism. You put the neoliberal in there, and you might avoid neo-fascism today. You might avoid it tomorrow. But next week, next year, next election, it's going to come until you address the issues that the neoliberal refuses to address. They're always going to be there waiting in the wings to take over. And, on the other side of that, it's not just that the people are suffering. It's also that there are people in the Democratic Party that still live the illusion that neoliberalism can provide some sort of lasting change or generate some kind of incrementalist change in America. There are still a large number of people on the left that still believe that. I'm not one of them, but I know 10 years back, I definitely was one of those people. And it's real easy to fall into that. You say, well, Rome wasn't built overnight, or change didn't come overnight. So let's take a look at the incrementalist approach. So let's say you're trying to get 100%, and every 4 to 8 years you get 4%, right? It would take you, a long amount of time to actually realize the full goal that you are trying to achieve, going 4% at a time, and you're trying to get 100%. And I would say, let's say in order for people to feel a real difference in their lives, you need to at least get 60 to 80%. Let's say you're doing 5% at a time. It's going to take at least 60 to 80% before people really feel a large enough difference in their everyday life, a large enough improvement in their everyday life to recognize and understand that it's from something outside of what they're doing. So if you have a situation where people are getting higher wages, they're not going to associate that necessarily with you unless it's like a drastic difference where it's clear that these higher wages or this new environment that they're living in or that they're prospering from is actually coming from something external. So I actually overdid exactly how much content I wanted to cover today, but we're just going to try to make it as far as we can. So now you're going 5% at a time. This is per election cycle. So this is every 4 years, you're moving 5% towards that goal. How long does it take you to get to 60% at 5% at a time? So you would have to win election and control the political process, 12 elections in a row, uninterrupted, to actually get 60% of the change that you wanted to achieve from some sort of incremental approach. Maybe if you're doing 10% at a time, you would have to win 6 elections in a row. That's 24 years. You have to dominate the political system in order to get 60% of what you want. And anybody that points to the New Deal and says, well, the New Deal wasn't built overnight. I was like, no. The New Deal actually was built overnight. Day one, you didn't have this. Roosevelt comes in, fights for it. Within 1 year, you have all of this stuff. Yes, it wasn't in the exact same form it is today. Black people were not allowed. Black people were not really included in the New Deal, and Social Security didn't cover all of the retirement population. But that doesn't mean that you have to do, well, we're going to cover 5% of the population at a time, or we're going to do a little bit at a time. No. You get 80% up front, where it actually creates a large enough difference in people's lives, and that difference is positive, and it's across the ideological spectrum. Today, nobody says Social Security was a bad idea. Nobody says unemployment insurance was a bad idea. And the people that do say that, they're on the fringe. I'm talking about the populists. Nobody believes that those things should be taken away or gotten rid of, from some ideological perspective, right? And that's because they made a positive impact in enough people's lives that is recognized by society. And if you want to make positive change going forward, that's the model you have to follow. You have to actually 80% up front, and then the remaining 20%, you can just get that, piecemeal by, election by election, but not 5% at a time. It'd have to be, the last 20% next election, or the last 20%, 2 terms later, the next 10 years. You have that much time to just get that last 20%. But the point is, you have to get the benefits up front, or else people won't recognize it, and you won't build a broad enough base of people that will support it and kind of keep the opposition from being able to take it away. A good example is the UK. Once they had national health care, like the right has been trying to take it away, but they can't. So they have to pretend like they support it and then try to undermine it from within. But that's a easier battle for the opposition, because they can just point to that and say, well, hey, look, you're undermining it. We're going to undo that. And they can just undo it. Right. So that's where we want to be. That's an easier position to hold than trying to get something that nobody has and nobody can really perceive what it would do for them outside of some rhetoric. And I know I had an analogy here, and it's basically a physics analogy. If you had like a rock and, you needed 50 newtons to move that rock, you can't just say, hey, I did 10 newtons. The problem's solved. The rock is not going to move until you actually apply a force exceeding the requirement. Then the rock will move. Maybe after the rock starts moving, you've overcome static friction, and, friction in motion, it's going to be a lot less, right? So you don't have to necessarily have the full 51 after it starts moving. But to get it moving, you need that first huge amount of effort to get over that point. And this is what I'll say about compromise. If we know we need 50 newtons, we can't say, well, I did 25. That's better than nothing. The rock didn't move. Our goal was to move the rock. It was not to say we did something and then go home and the rock is still in the exact same place it was yesterday or the day before that or the last decade. That's not the goal. At some point you have to say, well, if I compromise the goal, which is to give it enough momentum to be able to move it, I'm no longer accomplishing my objective, which is to move the rock. And this goes back to what I was saying. If you don't stick to those moral imperatives, hold fast to them, whether because you're courageous, whether because you're stubborn, whether because you have a deep empathy for those who are suffering or those who, just haven't found justice in our world. Whatever your motivation is, it really doesn't matter too much to me. But the point is, you have to hold on to that and realize we need 51 newtons to move the rock. Let's move the rock.